Hello and welcome to the 105. I'm Cooper Petagna. That's 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting Andrew Ivins. Week 9 of college football is in the books. And Drew, it's been about 9 weeks we've been trying to figure out what's the best way to recap week to week. And I think we came up with the idea, why not just start with studs and duds? And if you're any college football fan, I think everybody had their eyes on College Station on Saturday night as it was rocking. Tale of two halves, Drew. But I'm going to give it to you. You got the T box on studs and duds here, man.
Yeah, how about Mike Elko's call to the bullpen? And Cooper, I got to admit, I am not a baseball guy. I think I watched my first MLB game Friday night, game one of the World Series. And that got me thinking. I mean, Mike Elko, Connor Wegman struggling against LSU. What does he do? He brings in Marcel Reed, the backup quarterback, who started a game for the Aggies when Wegman was hurt. And it's just a completely different story in the second half for the Aggies. When Wegman was in the game, they're averaging 3.6 yards per play. They bring in Marcel Reed, who is an explosive runner. That offense now averages 9.9 yards per play. Aggies had lost 26 straight games when they were down by more than 10 points at halftime. And Marcel Reed plays the hero. He secures the 38-23 victory for Texas A&M over LSU. Cooper, this is a kid you recruited heavily coming out of high school. We like what we saw from him against Florida. It was the same thing, all right? He can scramble. You can use some design runs with him. You think about Colin Klein, the offensive coordinator there. You can make a case that, hey, maybe Marcel Reed fits Texas A&M a little bit better. He ends up running for 3 touchdowns on 9 carries, only completes 2 passes, but hey, haven't seen this before. I think it's the greatest call to the bullpen we've seen since Nick Saban went to Tua in the SEC championship many years ago.
I was about to say, I like that one a lot. It felt like Marcel Reed unlocked Colin Klein more than Marcel Reed maybe unlocked Texas A&M in that offense. They have the parts there, especially on the offensive line. I know they're moving things around, playing some young guys, but Marcel Reed, just in terms of what he's able to offer with the legs, and you think about the type of player Colin Klein was as well, it seems like there's a lot of synergy there between those two, maybe more of a fit stylistically than what we saw with Connor Wegman. Drew, I think it's easy to get caught up in Marcel Reed, where Texas A&M is right now, only one loss that came to Notre Dame, so they're still defeated in SEC play. But I kind of wonder what happens to Connor Wigman. This is a guy that a lot of people like, former 5-star. You know, there's some NFL buzz around him, probably not coming back or coming out this year to the NFL draft, but potentially we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks and what happens with Texas A&M. If you're a betting man, you have to bet it's Marcel Reed's show from this point forward. All right, Drew, I'm going to stick with the quarterback position. And it's kind of funny you brought up Marcel Reed. How about Penn State? Drew Aller goes down late in the second quarter in this game. We'll get some updates on him and what his injury status looks like for Ohio State this week. But Bo Prabula steps in and no problem. 11 of 13, 98 yards, led back-to-back touchdown drives for Penn State, Drew. And you kind of like the way that this kid's wired. Reminds me a little bit of Trace McSorley, what they were able to do with his legs in the RPO game. This guy is a gamer. If Drew Aller ends up missing an extended period of time, Drew, I actually think Penn State is in a good spot here. Obviously, you got Ohio State coming up. You got teams like Washington, Purdue, Minnesota, and Maryland. That is a pretty easy, navigable schedule for Penn State outside of Ohio State. Interesting spot, but they lost Anthony Donka. They lost Denai Dennis Sutton. This is really a testament to Penn State's depth, and they passed the test.
Oh, Coop, I was telling you, I think Sunday morning, you're only good as your backup quarterback. And we talk about the college football playoff, 12 teams, right? Remember last season what happened to Florida State? Jordan Travis goes down. They don't have much of an answer at that position, don't have a guy that can come in and provide a spark. Marcel Reed does it at Texas A&M. Bo does it at Penn State. Hey, for my first dud here, I'm going to stick with the quarterbacks because I don't think anyone is really talking about this. UCF, they've lost 5 straight. Gus Malzahn, he fires defensive coordinator Ted Roof. And Cooper, I'm based in Orlando. I'm kind of scratching my head about this because I want to know what's going on with UCF's offense. They have played 4 different quarterbacks this season, and none of them have been hurt. It's not like one guy went down, they had to bring someone else in, and it has been musical chairs there. And I've never seen anything really like this. So KJ Jefferson, the Arkansas transfer, he starts off the year. Then they go to EJ Colson, a prospect that reclassified from 2025 to 2024. Everyone talks about Ryan Williams' age. Well, this kid, he's young too. I think he's only 16 years old. give him 3 series, and then they turn to Ja'Cory Brown, the Miami transfer. It just feels like a mess here. Dylan Rizet got into the game this past weekend when they lost to BYU. I just haven't seen anything like it in terms of just pick your quarterback. And I know it's difficult coming out of camp, and with name, image, likeness now, you got these deals. KJ Jefferson comes with a high price tag, but it seems like to me, this is quarterback malpractice, and it has sunk UCF season, just them not being able to go, not even with the hot hand, but just pick a quarterback and roll with it.
Yeah, if you don't have one, or if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have one, right? That's how the saying goes. UCF right now has gone through four, so a little bit of a tough spot there. Do you expect it more from UCF year two, Big 12? I think they're one of those programs, especially given where they are placed geographically and the job that they're doing from an NIL standpoint. I think you expect it more. Been a letdown in year two of the Big 12 for Gus Malzahn. Drew, I'm going to go back to that Texas A&M LSU game, and let's talk about LSU for a second, because my dud is LSU's no-show in the second half. Drew, at halftime, I was ready to build a statue of Blake Baker, the defensive coordinator at LSU. And this is a pro Blake Baker podcast, but LSU struggled, especially in the second half. And I think that defense played about as well as you could possibly imagine in that first half. They were not ready for Marcel Reed. And to me, that's one of those things that is inexcusable. You talk about a guy that started 3 games this season because Connor Wegman has been banged up. That is an element that I think you have to be ready for. But let's really flip it to where the problem is. Offensively, you have 2 potential first rounders in Will Campbell, Emory Jones, that man both of your tackle spots, and you ran the ball for 24 yards. Drew, they are 111th in rushing this year. They have issues there. They have put so much on Garrett Nussmeier, as talented as he is. He is still a first-year starter. He passed for over 400 yards. He had a beautiful first half. Now LSU becomes one-dimensional in the second half. They can't run the ball. They have a bevy of backs that are certainly talented between Caden Durham, Caleb Jackson, and Josh Williams. They have to get something going there. I get it. It was a talented front. Give Texas A&M a lot of credit. That's not good enough. If you want to be a playoff team, you have to be a two-dimensional team that has that type of balance. They've been more 60-40, 70-30 in terms of pass to run. That ain't going to cut it. Brian Kelly wants to cut his teeth on a team that can control the line of scrimmage, and they have the talent. That's why it's a head scratcher. Drew, not a good performance there in the second half. And I think unfortunately, it's going to stick with him for the rest of the year.
Man, you're about to build a statue of Blake Baker. Should I tell everyone how you texted me at halftime? Hey, what's Garrett Nussmeier's odds to go number 1 in the NFL draft? Never followed it up. I've never even brought it up just until now, right? They are way down the board, especially after that performance. My next stud, Mario Cristobal's offensive line at Miami. Cooper, I don't know how much of that game you saw on Saturday night. Big rivalry in the state of Florida. FSU's had their struggles. I think everyone thought Miami was going to come out and put up 50, 60 points just based on what Cam Ward has been able to do. Miami took a completely different route when it came to the game plan. They wanted to win at the point of attack, and that Mario Cristobal, former offensive lineman, former O-line coach, they did just that. They win 36-14. They just grinded down the Seminoles. Hurricanes ran for 230 yards. I went back and I looked in the series. That's the most since at least 1999. I can't find box scores after that. 17 rushing first downs for Miami. That is the most for them in a game since Toledo back in 2018. This is just an all-around performance. Damian Martinez, the transfer running back from Oregon State, he goes for 148 yards, 2 touchdowns on 15 carries. Coop, you dig into the PFF, you watch those big bodies up front. These are the guys that Mario, ever since he arrived in Coral Gables, ever since he came back home, he has been hoarding these individuals. Zach Carpenter at center, Jalen Rivers, left tackle, Inez Cooper, Francis Mawanoa. These guys put it on Florida State. And 2 years ago, it was the completely reverse script. The Seminoles just ran all over Miami. Not the case this time around. Yes, Cam Ward in the Heisman conversation, but man, that offensive line is really the identity of that offense.
And I think a lot of people might look at this game and say, oh, Cam Ward only had 200 yards passing. This is the way that Miami wants to win. It's nice to have the luxury of Cam Ward to bail you out in certain games, but to be able to control the line of scrimmage the way that they did, really the left side really kind of stood out to me when I watched the tape. Zach Carpenter, the transfer they get from Indiana, Jalen Rivers slides inside the guard on the left side. Markel Bell has been a revelation for them. Miami, Mario Cristobal, Alex Mirabal, this is the way they want to win games. Drew, I'm going to go with Jarquez Hunter as my next stud at Auburn. What a day he had. 23 carries, 278 yards, 2 touchdowns. Auburn needed every bit of it as the Tigers get a victory in Lexington, 24-10 over Kentucky. Auburn needed this win. Hugh Freeze was quote unquote questionable coming into the game, battling an illness. But Drew, I think the biggest takeaway for me, although this is a must win for Auburn in this situation and something that they can build off of, Kentucky's defensive line for the second straight week has been lifeless. And I mean, guys that can't get off of blocks. You're looking like you're going back and you're watching the tape and you thought that the whistle was blown. Auburn did a good job taking advantage of that. As much as I like the performance from Jarquez Hunter, I was equally disappointed in Kentucky's front seven and the lack of resistance of a fight of what they put up there. But a big win for Auburn and Jarquez Hunter. And Drew, we talked about it. The future of that room looks bright as well with a guy like Alvin Henderson coming in as well.
Love that one, Cooper. I got a dud for you. How about Utah and Kyle Whittingham? 2 years ago, they signed their highest-ranked recruiting class ever under Whittingham. That was after back-to-back Rose Bowl appearances. You look up right now, Utah is 4-4. I understand the quarterback situation. It hasn't been ideal, but the Utes have a defense that ranks number 14 nationally. They lose on a last-second field goal over the weekend to Willie Fritz in Houston. I don't think anyone saw Utah sitting right here, and I just kind of wonder what is next for that program. They, too, now in the Big 12. You look at the recruiting class, sitting 51st nationally right now. Cooper, they don't have a 4 or a 5-star prospect committed. It is all 3 stars. Morgan Staley's the head coach in waiting. I'm just wondering, kind of getting ahead of it here, is this the last year for Kyle Whittingham? It seems like something needs to change. Yes, Isaac Wilson, younger brother of Zach Wilson, he's had some flashes. I think he's dealing with the turnover issue, which we expected coming out of high school, but huge disappointment. And again, to lose to Houston, which is in a complete rebuild, not good.
Yeah, big time Willie Fritz, friend of the pod. Definitely somebody that we feel very confident in being successful long-term there in Houston. And in a tough season for Kyle Whittingham in Utah, you think about Cam Rising just has not been able to stay healthy. They got to turn it over to the freshman. Obviously, a little bit of a turnover issue there. Drew, my last one, the dud for the day. How about Syracuse quarterback Kyle McCord, who up until this point has had a pretty strong season at Syracuse, transferring from Ohio State, threw the ball 64 times, completed 35 times, Drew. He threw 5 interceptions. 3 of those went for pick sixes. You talk about a tough night. He still passed for over 320 yards. But, Drew, here's why it hurts. Kyle McCord, in what a lot of people would consider a pretty down quarterback class, has a pathway to kind of work himself into a day 2 NFL draft choice. I still think he can do that. There are a lot of believers out there. Ryan Wilson, CBS Sports, Chris Trapasso as well. They love this kid and Kyle McCord. This was a really tough performance for him. Obviously, Pitt undefeated, playing well. Eli Holstein, Pat Narduzzi. We'll talk about them a little bit later in the show, but a big missed opportunity for Kyle McCord. There you have it, Week 9, studs and duds. Stick around. We got some freshman flowers coming up next. Welcome back to the 105. Time now for Week 9 freshman flowers. Some familiar faces, some new names as well. Drew, I will let you start this one off, and I am particularly happy that this name is now up on our radar.
Yeah, Coop, I don't know if you can see this right here. I got to give a shout out to my guy, the fellow Eagle Scout, Will Hammond at Texas Tech. Thrust into action on Saturday, right? Baron Morton goes down with an injury. Will Hammond steps in, Cooper, and he was dropping some dimes for the Red Raiders on the road at TCU. I know he fumbles late. They aren't able to win the game, but I thought he was impressive. 10 of 15 passing, 121 yards. He led 3 straight scoring drives to open up the second half. Will Hammond, got to spend time around him last summer at the Elite 11 finals. Kind of a kid out of Texas we didn't know much about, but man, that interview, just getting to pick his brain, loved everything about him. In addition to being an Eagle Scout, Cooper, he owned his own lawn service. That's how he made money in high school. Finished as our 14th ranked quarterback. I think he is the future there for Joey McGuire in Texas Tech. Excited to see him play some more here this season as a true freshman.
Yeah, you talk about a stat god too. Accounted for over 5,000 yards of offense, 3,900 passing, another 1,000 rushing, 48 total touchdowns as a senior in high school. Drew, he was one of those guys we saw at the Elite 11 finals in LA. And it was kind of one of those names you write down in your book and you say, all right, I got to go back and watch the tape because what we just saw live and in person, there's more there than what we thought coming into the weekend. Cool to see him get some experience. Definitely really cool on the Eagle Scout stuff. Didn't know you guys had that in common. All right, here's a familiar name for you, Drew. Corey Parrish. Just seems like every week we keep coming back to the man that you like to call Koi Pond. Drew, top 100 player for us, number 5 safety, MVP of the All-American Bowl. Obviously, if you watch this show, you know that we are fans of Koi Parrish, the safety at Minnesota. He stayed home, spurned Ohio State. Drew, he had another interception this week, his fifth of the season. That is tied in the Big Ten for most interceptions. Minnesota beats Maryland 48-23. They look like they have something here in Koi Parrish, and not just a good football player, Drew. It is super early. But as somebody that has studied the NFL draft last year, just a little bit, probably the top 50 guys. But you look at a guy like Cooper DeJean, I brought this up last time, and what he does, and this guy's ability to play closer to the line of scrimmage, which is kind of what the vision for a Cooper DeJean. Corey Parrish, what he can do, Drew, playing the deep third, you can match him up in the slot. They like him as a blitzer as well. His versatility, his speed, his athleticism, the size, but the football intuition and instincts that he plays with is pretty special. I know it's early, but this kid to me, Drew's got all the makings of a guy that could go day one a couple years from now.
Yeah, we should have ranked him higher. Cooper, I think you're burying the lead here. Coy Parrish played a snap on offense for Minnesota against Maryland. They used him at running back. Please, PJ Fleck, give us some more of that. Loved Coy Parrish coming out. Huge riser, like you said. One of the first guys I pushed to get into the All-American Bowl last year. He was a three-phase impact player. They've used him as a return man, but he can do it on offense. Guy that was on the freaks list, ran a sub-11 second time in the 100-meter dash and sub 50-degree weather. Yeah, that's kind of impressive. Love, love, love that one, Cooper. How about Jay Crawford at Auburn? True freshman corner. That's why he's in the freshman flowers. He was the 24/7 Sports True Freshman of the Week for Chris Hummer. He does an excellent job every week. You can check that out at 247sports.com. In Auburn's 24-10 win, he comes down with his first career takeaway. It came at a key time, right? Auburn was trailing in that game. They needed a spark of momentum. Jay Crawford provides it. Cooper, this is a guy that we actually had in the top 247. He slides out, finishes as corner number 35 for us. I went back in my notes. This is someone I always liked. I'm not surprised he is playing early. He had the size, and the biggest thing is he's aggressive, right? He will hand check. He will jump in front of routes. We saw him do that on Saturday night. Kid out of Parkview High School, the big name there, Mike Matthews, Tennessee wide receiver, but Jay Crawford showing he can get it done as well. This is big for Auburn, and you want to know why? They continue to recruit all these smaller corners. They need a big guy to play on the outside. Jay Crawford looks like that dude on the Plains for the next few years.
Playing a lot of young guys too. I mean, Keldrick Falk, obviously a true sophomore, but you think about guys like DeMarcus Riddick as well. Caleb Harris comes to mind. Drew, the future is bright at Auburn. We have talked about it a lot. A lot of people frustrated with what they've done on the field this year, and rightfully so. Seems like the cavalry is coming. The good thing about this, Drew, and what people would say is a wasted year, the young guys get invaluable experience. That's what we've seen with Crawford. All right, Drew. Off your recommendation, I'm going to go with Omar Thornton, a guy that you scouted from American Heritage in Florida, team high 13 tackles for Boston College against Louisville. Boston College comes up short in that game. They lose 31-27. Pretty interesting kid, Drew, when you consider that some people thought he was a linebacker, other people thought he was a safety, playing safety for the Golden Eagles on Saturday. Drew, just the instincts, especially in run support, definitely as a blitzer as well, continue to show up for this kid. He is a fun watch. Didn't know a lot about him coming into the week, but as you recommended him, you turn on the tape. Does not seem like a freshman. Obviously, a little bit tweener the size-wise. You try to figure out kind of where he fits. This guy has all the makings to be a very, very productive Saturday player.
Coop, I think he had only played like 30 snaps prior to that game on Friday night. He ends up playing 70, highest graded defender for the Eagles. Disappointing result for them. They were in it against Louisville. And Omar Thornton, and let's educate our listeners. Let's educate our audience right now, right? We are updating our rankings, preparing for National Signing Day, me and you always talking about, hey, look for players where the arrow is pointing up. We want them to see these guys playing their best football before they head off to college. Omar Thornton, he was at American Heritage, the home of Pat Surtain II, the home of Tyson Campbell, all those guys. It's an NFL factory. Omar Thornton was the best player on that defense last season. He was the Broward County Defensive Player of the Year for the Sun Sentinel. This was a guy a lot of schools had already recruited, had already filled up. Boston College came in late with Bill O'Brien. Looks like they got a steal in South Florida.
All right, a couple other names to mention for the second consecutive week. Arkansas running back Braylon Russell, Drew, ran for 175 on 16 carries. Arkansas had themselves a day as they ran wild, 58-25 in a blowout win over Mississippi State, third most all time in a game for a Hogs freshman behind Darren McFadden, Drew. That's pretty good for Braylon Russell there in terms of the production of what he had on Saturday. USC edge Cam Fountain, another guy that we really liked a lot out of the state of Georgia. 3 pressures, 2 hurries, and a sack. USC, they beat Rutgers. BYU safety, Drew, and we all know you're a big Kalani Sitake guy, so we got to give a shout out here. Falatau Satuala, he had an interception, 2 tackles. BYU, they stay undefeated. 34-27 win over Central Florida. And then how about this one? A name that was kind of forgotten, was in the 5-star mix, fell out. Texas quarterback Kobe Black had an INT graded out 86 plus, according to PFF, in Texas's win over Vandy. Drew, any quick thoughts on any of those guys?
Satuala for BYU. I mean, me and you, Cooper, were talking about this. I feel like I watch BYU and I don't know a lot of the faces. And we need to go in and examine that recruiting class every year. Fatuala, he was a top 247 prospect, but I mean, that staff, they do an excellent job. I had a chance to hear Kalani Sitake speak this spring at a coach's clinic, and just the culture there, right? He wants guys that want to be at BYU. He wants to be at BYU. I think it's special what he's got going on there. And when you win games like this, it allows you to go out and get the blue chippers. They become more and more interested in BYU. So I thought he was a big performance for him. And if BYU stays in this college football playoff conversation, we might be hearing more about Satulala moving forward.
All right, Kalani Sitake, BYU, not the only remaining Power 4 undefeated team. We got Pittsburgh out there still as well, still remains undefeated. We're going to talk about them next on how they built this. Stick around. Welcome back to the 105. Time for How They Built This, where we talk about a program and how they built this. And right now, Drew, no better program to talk about than Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh 7-0, 3-0 in conference play in the ACC, coming off a big win against Syracuse, where they won that game 41-13. And Drew, one of the more interesting stories right now in the country is the group that Pat Narduzzi has. And you've kind of dug in on it a little bit, because this is not a program right now that had a ton of continuity coming into the season. It's one of those coming off a tough season last year in 2023, where they've kind of moved some things around, and they're having a lot of success because of it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget, Cooper, that Pittsburgh won the ACC back in 2021. Last year, 3-9. They have to hit reset. And what Pat Narduzzi did is he went outside his comfort zone, right? And he hired Cade Bell, a 31-year-old offensive coordinator from Western Carolina that had one of the top offenses at the FCS ranks. They bring in Eli Holstein, the Alabama transfer at quarterback. And Cooper, I had an opportunity to listen to Pat Narduzzi speak this offseason. He was in Orlando, making the rounds, talking to high school coaches. And on the agenda, it just said 90 minutes, Pittsburgh, Pat Narduzzi on hot. I had no idea what he was going to say. It just said hot. It was a 90-minute film session, him talking about his defense, right? It's the 3 under, 2 deep, right? Limit the indicators of where you're going to blitz. But the biggest thing is Pat Narduzzi's defense doesn't ask his defenders to think. That's big, because Cade Bell's offense, right? It is a air raid. Not a lot of thinking on that side of the ball either. You look up at Pittsburgh right now, they rank 25th nationally in total offense. They were 116th last season, 56th in total defense, 51st last season. They're 11th nationally in scrimmage plays of 40-plus yards. And the D is tied for 11th in tackles for loss and 20th nationally in sacks, right? So they're doing it. And I think what they were able to accomplish in the transfer portal isn't talked about enough here, Cooper. Cade Bell, he brought a couple really good guys with him from Western Carolina. Desmond Reed, the all-purpose back. Sincere Lee, the wide receiver, also gets Ralph Williams, who started off at Western Carolina before going to San Diego State. Those two receivers scored against Syracuse. Obviously, the defense made things very difficult for Kyle McCord. But I just think what Pat Narduzzi, how he was able to recalibrate. We're talking about a guy that's been at Pittsburgh for 10 years in the Steel City. He put his ego aside. He made the changes, and you look up now, they're 7-0 in the hunt for potentially an ACC title. And who knows, maybe they can get into the college football playoff conversation.
All right, you brought up the idea, what I thought was interesting about Cade Bell in Pittsburgh and Pat Narduzzi hiring him away from FCS school in Western Carolina. You mentioned Desmond Reed, Sincere Lee as well. Is this something that we see in the future, right? Florida State definitely probably going to make some changes after this season. You would think so. And maybe that's just a program that comes to mind. But a guy like Mike Norvell, think about bringing a guy like Brennan Marion over from UNLV. And if he's got a couple guys that want to tag along with him, maybe it's a good way to kind of jumpstart your offense a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of fan bases, right, as we get closer to the end of November, December, when there's firings and hirings. Like, I think if you're a college football fan and, hey, my team isn't going to make a bowl game, my head coach is going to have to make a change because he's got some buyout, you're kind of searching for that group of five coordinator, that FCS coordinator who can bring some individuals with him. And it's not just Pittsburgh that's done this, Cooper, with the Western Carolina transfers. How about at Indiana, right? All those guys they brought in from James Madison, Indiana's undefeated. So I do think in this current environment, this current landscape where player movement is at an all-time high, I mean, how many, who else is going to be looking to capitalize on a coach that can bring multiple parts with them? And I'm not just talking about like one or two players, a core of an offense, a core of a defense, because it's working at Pittsburgh and it's working there at Indiana, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So I do think that is certainly something as we get to the coaching carousel season. I call it silly season. Keep an eye on that, right? Who's getting linked to where and which players could they bring with them to a new spot?
Yeah, we got to give a ton of credit not only to Cade Bell, Pat Narduzzi, that entire staff. How about Eli Holstein, Drew, former top 247 quarterback, transfers from Alabama? This is a guy that was kind of dinged in the evaluation process because he had a little bit of a mechanical throwing motion. He was a lot better athlete than I think a lot of people thought. Kind of struggled at the Elite 11 finals in LA. You kind of toss him aside a little bit. He goes to Alabama. He's a forgotten man, transfers to Pitt. Don't really know what the fit's going to look like. You look up, all of a sudden, Drew, his first year as a starter, he's 7-0. Pitt's ranked in the top 20.
I've heard from someone there at Pittsburgh, Eli Holstein has exceeded all expectations. I don't think they thought he would be this good. And Cooper, what was funny after that win over Syracuse, obviously that hot defense kind of was the story of the night. You said it, the 3 pick sixes. I mean, they made it where Syracuse couldn't do anything. Pat Narduzzi was upset that Eli Holstein and Cade Bell's offense couldn't find a flow, right? The defense was scoring too much. It took a while for the offense to get going. And if you've ever been around Pat Narduzzi, you see how fired up he gets. Get him on a film clicker and just have him break down plays. It's awesome. But for a coach that's wired that way, to be a little upset that they're not scoring enough points, I just think it's a bit ironic. And it shows that he truly is changing and adapting his program to remain competitive in the ACC.
Yeah, there you see the odds there for Pittsburgh to win the ACC currently at plus 1,800. The boys like to mix it up every now and then. We might get in on that action. Drew, but the remaining schedule here, you got at SMU in Dallas, UVA at home, Clemson at home, which will be a big game, at Louisville, at Boston College. So realistically, let's start with the ACC. What do you think the odds are that Pittsburgh can run the table here and win the ACC championship, find themselves in a college football playoff?
Well, Coop, I think they match up well with these teams that are on the schedule, right? Clemson's the one that kind of sticks out, but again, that hot defense, a lot of eye candy, a lot of disguise. Cade Klubnik, I mean, he's had a heck of a rebound from what we saw in week 1 against Georgia. But here's a little nugget for you, Cooper. Kirby Smart has spent time with Pat Narduzzi studying all those different blitz schemes. So if Georgia could take that defense from offense from Clemson out of the game, hey, why can't Pittsburgh do it?
Yeah, that's a good point there. And they got a big test this week. SMU obviously don't want to look ahead to Clemson, but Drew can't wait for that matchup as well. Guys, stick around. We got the transaction wire coming up next. Welcome back to the 105. Signing day is 37 days away, and the countdown is on. But Drew, it's not just 2025s, it's 2026s as well as we get ready for a 2026 update at 24/7 Sports as well. But let's start with Texas A&M, Drew. They had a monster weekend recruiting-wise. Not only was it great for Mike Elko and company to get the win over a close rival in LSU, but Drew, to do it in front of some of the guys they did it in front of, I think will go a long way as well. Let's start in 2026 as they got a trio of pledges. Jordan Carter out of the state of Georgia, along with his teammate Aaron Gregory and Samu Mawala, as well, a top 247 edge, Drew. So A&M getting it done on the trail, not to mention 2025 class, they rank in the top 10 as well, Drew. They're picking on guys like Terry Shelton, a receiver that we love, currently committed to Arizona. Other guys, 2026, Lamar Brown, #1 interior offensive lineman in the country in 2026. Elijah Haven from Louisiana, #1 quarterback in 2027. Brandon Arrington, you can throw in that group as well. So from 25 to 2027, this was a big week for Texas A&M and the Aggies. They needed to capitalize, Drew. It just seems like everything's moving in the right direction for Mike Elko, not only on the field, but off of it as well.
Coop, it's like me and you are running the shop there in College Station. This is exactly what we would be doing. And hey, back in 2022, Texas A&M signed the highest ranked recruiting class ever, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. It kind of fell apart, right? There's still some pieces here and there of that defensive line, which had a huge impact against LSU. But when Mike Elko was hired, we said it was going to be a little bit different, right? They're going to identify talent, and the biggest thing is that back end of the roster. They were going to find guys with NFL traits. I think this is all playing out right now in front of us. You said it, where they're ranked in the class of 2025. 2026 is where they have a chance to, I think, potentially challenge for a #1 ranked class. And the same thing maybe in 2027. I mean, you look at the visitors list. You said Terry Shelton, the Arizona commit. We think he's another T-Mac. This is a late bloomer, one of the biggest risers for us in the most recent rankings update. They already have a quarterback in Husan Longstreet, but Terry Shelton, I mean, he's a potential game breaker, not only in the Big 12, but in the SEC. And then the one that really gets me fired up, I was smiling when you said it, Elijah Haven, our #1 ranked prospect in the class of 2027. You can tell when a school has it dialed in, when they're thinking 2, 3, 4 years down the line at the quarterback position. It's the most important thing. Huge weekend for Texas A&M. I don't think they're going away. I think Mike Elko, what he is doing there, yeah, I loved the call to the bullpen, but I love what he's also doing when it comes to talent acquisition and how he is building that roster.
Give a lot of credit to his general manager, Derek Miller, who worked with him at Duke. And we said it, Drew. It's gonna have a Duke feel at a much larger level, and that's a compliment. If you follow the way Duke recruited under Mike Elko for the last 2 years, these guys had a synergy in terms of their vision, what type of players that they wanted to bring in, develop. They are doing that now at Texas A&M. Drew, let's talk about Colorado. And Colorado, one of those teams that, speaking of late bloomers, right? It seems like they get going once the clock almost strikes midnight. And Drew, they're going to have some decisions to make in trying to figure out, all right, how are we going to backfill Shedeur Sanders? How are we going to backfill guys like Travis Hunter? Well, they're working on it right now. Julian Lewis committed to USC, top 120 prospect for us at 24/7 Sports. He was on a visit over the weekend to Colorado. They flip Adrian Wilson from Arizona State as well, along with Christian Hudson from Central Florida. So Colorado, Drew, as you like to always say, they're taking the car out of the garage, and Dion is getting this thing going. They're currently sitting at number 79 in the 24/7 Sports Composite team rankings. Got other guys out there as well, Byron Baldwin, Carday Smith, London Merritt, a couple guys committed to other programs. But Drew, Julian Lewis, let's talk about the quarterback. What do you think about the idea of him being the replacement for a guy like Shedeur Sanders?
Cooper, did you see him, the photo of him on his visit? He was like in a pink sweater, sunglasses, big chains. He seems to be pretty drawn to what Prime has got going on there in Boulder. And hey, if Julian Lewis wants to play in 2025, I think Colorado is the school for him. Yeah, you can make a case for Indiana. You can make a case for USC as well. But if he wants to be in the spotlight, then Colorado, I think that is the school to keep an eye on. And hey, Deion Sanders, he is good for a big flip every kind of signing window. Travis Hunter many years ago, Dylan Edwards, who was there with him at Colorado, now at Kansas State. They close better than most. Cormani McLean, another name to bring up there. Keep an eye on Julian Lewis. You said it, 37 days. I think we're going to be talking a lot about Juju here as we get closer to that signing day window. And the other thing, Cooper, I got to eat some crow here, right? I think 2 months ago when you asked me about Colorado, I said, hey, this is a massive roster rebuild. I don't see it. I don't think Prime's going to stay around. I think once Shedeur leaves, I think once Travis leaves, he's just going to, ride off into the sunset. Maybe that's the NFL. Maybe that's back into a broadcaster role. But got to give him credit, right? Bowl eligible. That's a huge deal. He's got Colorado ranked. They could be in the hunt for a Big 12 title. And more importantly, getting some nice pieces on the recruiting trail. Adrian Wilson, like you said, really good wide receiver, talented. He's got some good track and field markers. Christian Hudson, right in my backyard, Daytona Beach. He's a spark plug in the middle. Reminds me a little bit of Penn State, Zayton Durant. So excited to see how Colorado is going to recruit here over the next 5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah, they deserve a lot of credit. Colorado bowl eligible. I think it's easy to get lost in the sauce a little bit. I think last year you see Colorado 4-8, obviously the big media hype machine, all behind Deion Sanders in Colorado in prime time. And why not, right? I mean, he's a spectacle we haven't seen in college football this year. It's a little bit different. It's almost the opposite. People kind of phased him out a little bit. Now they're doing the things that I think a lot of people thought they were going to do last year. And Drew, this was a team that won one game before he got there. So if you think about it, 4 wins in the first year, 6 already through 9 weeks of this season. He's doing a tremendous job, deserves a lot of credit. A guy like Julian Lewis makes a ton of sense as he is one of the more day one ready guys, even with the reclassification to really kind of fill in for a guy like Shedeur Sanders. So we'll see what happens there. Let's talk about a place that is struggling a bit, Drew, and struggling to get out of their way of their own shadow. How about Florida State, man? This is tough, right? Not only on the field, but off the field as well. They lose to Miami on Saturday. They also lose a commitment from C.J. Wiley. Looks like Chase Lofton, their tight end commit, could be flipping to Nebraska soon. Solomon Thomas is looking around. Kevin Wynn, they're one of the top interior defensive lineman in the country. Georgia all in on him, Drew. So Mike Norvell, his class ranks 48th right now with 11 prospects committed. That's good enough for 11th in the ACC. And how about the 0 receivers committed as well, Drew? I don't know about the future outlook. I think is the other pill that's really, really tough to swallow if you're a Florida State fan, because it's not one of those situations like we just talked about with an Auburn or even a Colorado where you're like, all right, well, where's the hope here, right? Where is the hope with Mike Norvell?
This will be one of the most interesting off seasons, I think, in recent memory for any college football program. I mean, Florida State, it could be 40 or 50 new faces there in Tallahassee. And how many high schoolers can they get? You said it, 37 days till signing day. Florida State doesn't have a lot of logs on the fire out there. They are losing commits at a rapid rate, and I don't know where they're going to turn. Now, Mike Norvell and his staff, they have made some really nice evaluations over the years, right? 3-star prospects that have exceeded expectations, that made plays for them last season during that magical run. But what are they going to do? I mean, you're going to have this tight 15-day window where you're going to have to speed date with a lot of guys in the transfer portal. You would think there's going to be some coaching staff changes there. How many kids are going to want to come to Tallahassee where Mike Norvell's seat all of a sudden is on fire? This will be extremely interesting to watch here. And hey, Luke Kromenhoek, the former top 247 quarterback, a favorite of the Oyster Boys. We saw him right on Saturday against Miami Coop. I thought he looked encouraging, right? Ryan Tannehill's the player comp on there on his profile. He was running around like Ryan Tannehill. So I do think they might have an arm of the future, but it's going to be a major reset. It's something that we really haven't seen. And if there's like a HBO or someone out there, hey, CBS Sports can do it. Like, let's get like a Hard Knocks, just front office for Florida State in December and January.
Yeah, you got to dig in if you're Florida State right now. If you're Mike Norvell, you need people in your corner that aren't front runners, that people understand hard work and substance and what this rebuild is going to look like. I think he's got to pick what does he want this to look like? I think he just signed a 7-year extension, right? So if he's actually going to be there for the long term, I would like to see them get more involved on the high school side, start to ramp it up, especially in the state of Florida. Right now, it's for Mario Cristobal and his choosing. So we'll see what happens with Florida State. Definitely a tough spot there, Drew. Let's talk about some commitments that came off the board over the weekend as well. And here's a notable one: Clinton Portis. You remember him? Speaking of Miami, a dog and somebody that played on Sundays for quite some time and a heck of a player. His son, Camden Portis, top 247 corner in 2026. Well, he's committed to the Miami Hurricanes, Drew, following in his dad's footsteps. He's not just a name. I love this kid. Got to see him work out over the summer/spring. I forget when it was, sometime in Charlotte. But man, you think about what this kid could be as a nickel, the football instincts. You can tell that football is kind of in his blood.
Yeah, I was talking with someone at Miami after I had seen him as well, and it's like usually you get these legacy prospects, and you're like, we might have to take him. I'm like, no, 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 no. This kid could start for you one day on the smaller side, but man, he plays like he's 6'4", 225 pounds. I love the addition of Camden Portis for the Hurricanes, kind of kickstarting their 2026 recruiting class. Yes, it's a layup. You're supposed to get the legacy prospect. You still have to execute. And one of the reasons why Miami was able to get it across the finish line or get him committed is because of what they're doing on the field, right? Mario Cristobal talked about it at his post-game press conference, right? Everyone can look around. We beat Florida. We beat Florida State. They're in position to create some noise here, not only in 26, but I think 2025. Keep an eye on their finish this cycle.
Couple other notables as well. Anthony Crua, 3-star linebacker, flipped from North Carolina to Georgia. Good player. We need to revisit that at another time. Tyan Lee flips from Central Florida to Ole Miss, the second flip from UCF. And then Mikael Skinner, Drew, a guy that we like a lot, tight end, camped in the top 247. He commits to Kentucky. So there you have it, the transaction wire. Busy weekend. And we got more coming up next as we discuss the Heisman odds and who our pick is for the rest of the season. Welcome back to the 105, and here are the current Heisman odds as they stand today as Dylan Gabriel, Oregon Ducks quarterback, leads the way, followed by Travis Hunter, Cam Ward, and Ashton Jeanty. Drew, we don't have a lot of time on this one, so I'm going to say make your case for one player the rest of the way.
Give me Superman Travis Hunter. I think I had him on our midseason awards. That was my midseason Heisman. Cooper, look at the schedule for Colorado there at Texas Tech, Utah, at Kansas, Oklahoma State. We know that Prime is going to play him on both sides of the ball. He's going to get a ton of targets from Shedeur Sanders. But I look at two potential true freshman quarterback on that schedule and potentially a Oklahoma State team that doesn't have much of a pulse. I think the opportunity is there for Travis Hunter to get 2 or 3 interceptions. I mean, I just gave a bunch of love earlier in the show to my guy Will Hammond. You got Isaac Wilson. Both those guys are prone to some mistakes. I think Travis Hunter, he's going to stuff the staff sheet. And hey, if Colorado gets in the Big 12 title game or in the conversation there, Travis Hunter deserves it to be in that, to be in New York, and he deserves to go home with some hardware.
If I'm a betting man, Drew, I think I'm going with Travis Hunter, but I'm not a betting man in this situation. Or maybe I am a betting man, and I already got money down on Cam Ward to win the Heisman, Drew. So I'm going to go diamond hands there with Cam Ward. I think this really depends on the next 4 weeks and kind of what it looks like and who's playing in the biggest games. I think Cam Ward, ACC championship, put Miami in that spot, Drew. I think can put him over the top. Colorado can't have any blemishes. Should be a heck of a thing to follow over the next couple of weeks. Guys, just a reminder, the 105, you can find us every Monday and Wednesday, the CBS Sports Network, and also the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. We appreciate you guys watching. As always, for Andrew Ivins, I'm Cooper Petagna. See you next time.